The morning sun poured through the tall courthouse windows, casting golden light across the polished wooden benches. The courtroom was already full, lawyers shuffling papers, families whispering nervously, reporters waiting to scribble down anything worth publishing. Everyone seemed tense except for one person. Officer Rachel strolled in like she owned the place. She wore her crisp white police uniform, the badge on her chest gleaming proudly, and an almost smug smile spread across her face. The way she moved, fast, loud, and careless, was enough to turn heads. She wasn't worried about the case against her. To her, this was just another day to show the world that she was untouchable. Rachel adjusted her belt, leaned against the wooden railing, and even chuckled as she looked around at the spectators. She caught sight of a group of people in the back, community members who had come because they believed in the importance of this trial. Rachel didn't hide her grin. She smirked at them as if to say, "Watch me win." Then the room shifted. The side door opened and Judge Williams entered. He was a man whose presence filled the room without effort. His robe was neat, his steps calm, and his face steady, neither smiling nor frowning. He had spent decades in courtrooms like this, listening to stories of arrogance, pain, injustice, and redemption. People respected him not because of the robe he wore, but because of the life he lived, firm, fair, and rooted in wisdom. As he sat down, the courtroom rose in silence. Everyone respected the moment. Everyone except Rachel. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Here we go again." The judge glanced at her briefly, his sharp eyes catching the disrespect instantly. But instead of reacting, he simply nodded to the clerk to begin. That calmness was what set him apart. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to prove himself. His silence had power. Rachel, however, mistook that silence for weakness. She leaned back in her chair with her arms folded, whispering to her lawyer in a mocking tone. When called to the stand, she walked up casually, shoulders squared, chin raised high, a smile plastered across her face. She looked less like a defendant and more like someone about to give a comedy routine. The clerk swore her in, and Rachel raised her right hand lazily, muttering the oath as if it were a joke. Then she sat down and leaned toward the microphone. "The prosecutor began. "Officer Rachel, you are here today because of the allegations that you used your badge to intimidate civilians, is that correct?" Rachel laughed loudly, startling the room. "Intimidate? That's it? Pathetic." Her words echoed through the chamber, and some in the audience gasped. The arrogance in her voice was heavy, dripping with mockery. She didn't just disrespect the prosecutor, she disrespected the entire system of justice. She didn't realize. The eyes of the community, the lawyers, and the press were fixed on her. Judge Williams remained still. His expression did not change. He watched her the way a teacher watches a student who believes she knows everything, waiting patiently for the lesson to unfold. Rachel leaned back in her chair, smiling as if she had already won. "You people don't get it. I've served for years. I've kept the streets safe. You think a few complaints will scare me? Please. I've seen tougher." The prosecutor pressed on, asking questions about the complaints filed against her. Citizens had claimed she mocked them, abused her authority, and treated them like they were beneath her. Each time, Rachel brushed it off with laughter. "Oh, they're exaggerating," she said. "People don't like being told what to do. That's their problem, not mine." The audience whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others clenched their fists in frustration, but Rachel seemed to enjoy the attention like it was all a performance staged for her amusement. Finally, Judge Williams leaned forward. His voice was calm, deep, and steady. "Officer Rachel," he said, "do you believe respect is important in the line of duty?" Rachel tilted her head, still grinning. "Respect? From who? Criminals? People who don't even understand the law? Respect is earned, Judge, and I've earned mine." Her tone carried arrogance, and the judge's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy in the room. Everyone leaned in, waiting for his response. "Respect," Judge Williams said slowly, is not something you demand. It is something you give, and in giving, you receive. Authority without respect is nothing but fear, and fear, officer, does not last. For the first time, Rachel's smile faltered. She shifted in her chair, but quickly forced a laugh, trying to cover the discomfort. That's a nice speech, Judge, but I don't see how it applies to me. I've got the badge, I've got the power, people do what I say, end of story. The judge didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned back in his chair, observing. His silence was heavier than any rebuke. The audience, however, felt the weight of his words. They nodded, whispered to each other, and some even wiped their eyes. Rachel, blind to the shift in the room, kept laughing. She thought she was winning. She thought she was proving her strength. But everyone else saw something different. They saw a woman whose pride had blinded her, whose arrogance was pushing her closer and closer to downfall. The prosecutor stepped back, allowing the judge to take control. Judge Williams looked directly at Rachel and said, "This courtroom is not a stage. It is a place of truth. You may laugh now, but truth has a way of silencing even the loudest voices." The room fell silent. Rachel swallowed, suddenly aware of the tension. For the first time that morning, her laughter felt out of place. And though part one of this story ends with her still arrogant, still smiling, the audience could sense it. Change was coming. The judge's calm presence was more powerful than her mocking laughter. The stage she thought belonged to her was about to transform into a lesson she would never forget. The courtroom was still buzzing after Rachel's loud laughter. Her mocking words, "That's it?" "Pathetic," lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. People shifted uneasily in their seats, glancing at the judge to see how he would respond. Judge Williams did not move quickly. He was not a man who rushed. He leaned back in his chair, his hands folded neatly on the bench, and watched Rachel with the same steady eyes he had carried through decades of cases. That silence, long, deliberate, and heavy, began to press against Rachel, more than any shouted reprimand ever could. Rachel, however, still mistook it for weakness. She smirked, leaned back in her chair, and crossed her legs casually. "What? No comeback?" she asked with a laugh. "Guess I was right. Nothing to see here." But the people in the courtroom didn't laugh with her. They watched the judge. His calmness was unnerving. It was like he was giving her enough rope to pull tighter and tighter around herself. Finally, his voice cut through the silence. "Officer Rachel," he said evenly, "do you understand why you are here?" Rachel gave a half shrug. "Because some people didn't like how I spoke to them. Because they're soft, because the world's changed and now everyone cries over nothing. That's why I'm here, not because I did anything wrong." The judge nodded slowly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He simply allowed her words to fill the air. The more she spoke, the clearer the truth became. Not about the citizens who filed complaints, but about Rachel herself. The prosecutor stepped forward again. "Officer Rachel, we have multiple statements from civilians who say you mocked them, called them names, and used your badge to threaten them. Do you deny this?" Rachel burst out laughing again. "Oh, come on. They're exaggerating. I was firm, yes. I was direct, yes. But intimidating? Threatening? Please. If they can't handle a little authority, maybe they shouldn't be breaking the law." Her words carried pride, and once again, murmurs rippled through the courtroom. People in the audience looked at one another with disbelief. Some were shaking their heads. A few whispered angrily. Judge Williams raised a hand slightly, and the whispers stopped instantly. He looked at Rachel and asked, "Tell me, officer, what does the word authority mean to you?" Rachel blinked, surprised by the question. "Authority? Simple. It means being in charge. It means people do what I say, that's it." The judge's expression did not change. "And what does service mean to you?" Rachel smirked. "Service? That's just the paperwork they put in the training manual. Service is what rookies believe in. Authority is what keeps the streets in line." The judge let her words settle again. The silence stretched, and once more the audience leaned forward. His eyes did not leave hers. Calmly, almost gently, he replied. Then perhaps you have confused your badge for a crown. The word struck harder than Rachel expected. She blinked, caught off guard, but quickly recovered with a scoff. Crown, badge, same difference. Either way, I've earned my place. People follow orders. That's all that matters. But in the courtroom, the tide had shifted. The judge's words carried more weight than her laughter. The audience's attention no longer belonged to Rachel's arrogance. It was locked on Judge Williams's quiet wisdom. The prosecutor stepped back again, sensing that the judge was slowly peeling away Rachel's shield of pride. Every time she spoke, she revealed more about herself. Every time the judge responded, he revealed more about the truth she was trying so hard to hide. Rachel's lawyer shifted nervously beside her. He whispered, "Maybe tone it down a little." Rachel laughed, out loud. "Tone it down? No, they need to hear it. They need to know who I am." But what she didn't realize was that the more she tried to show her strength, the more she revealed her weakness. Her arrogance wasn't power, it was fear disguised as laughter. Judge Williams leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Officer, Rachel, the people you serve are not beneath you. They are not toys for you to command. They are human beings, each with dignity, each deserving respect. Do you believe they deserve respect?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Respect is earned, Judge. I don't hand it out for free." The judge's gaze deepened. "Respect is not a gift. It is a reflection. When you give it, it returns to you. When you withhold it, you will find yourself standing alone." The courtroom was utterly still. The spectators hung on every word. Even the lawyers lowered their pens, listening as though they too were students in a classroom. Rachel's smirk faltered just slightly, but she forced it back, unwilling to show weakness. "Nice speech," she muttered. "But it doesn't change the fact that I'm the one in uniform, not them, not you." The judge didn't respond immediately. He let her words echo, heavy and hollow. Then, with the faintest shake of his head, he said softly, "Uniforms can be taken off. Badges can be removed, but character? That remains long after." The sentence hit harder than Rachel expected. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. For the first time, she didn't have a quick laugh ready. The audience, however, nodded quietly. Some even clapped before the bailiff silenced them. Judge Williams' silence returned once more. He didn't need to debate her. He didn't need to argue. His calmness was louder than her arrogance. His silence was teaching her a lesson she didn't even realize she was learning yet. Rachel leaned back in her chair, frowning slightly. For the first time that day, she felt the weight of the courtroom pressing against her. It wasn't her stage anymore. It wasn't her show. Slowly, almost invisibly, the power in the room was shifting. And everyone but Rachel could see it. And as part 2 closes, the arrogant officer still laughed outwardly, but inside, a crack had formed. The judge's silence, his refusal to match her arrogance with anger, was starting to unsettle her. What she thought was weakness was, in truth, a strength she had never encountered before, and it was only the beginning. The courtroom felt heavier now. The silence Judge Williams carried with him had started to settle into everyone's chest. Even those who came expecting drama were beginning to realize they were witnessing something deeper. Not just a trial, but a lesson unfolding in real time. Rachel, however, wasn't ready to surrender her stage. She shifted in her chair, straightened her back, and plastered a wide grin across her face. "This is going nowhere," she muttered loudly enough for people around her to hear. "I should be back on duty, not wasting my time here." Judge Williams glanced at her but said nothing. Instead, he leaned slightly forward and asked the prosecutor, "Please bring in the first witness." The doors opened, and a middle-aged man walked in slowly. His clothes were neat but worn, his hands calloused from years of labor. He looked nervous, but when his eyes met the judge's, he seemed to draw courage. "This is Mr. Davis," the prosecutor explained. He filed one of the complaints against Officer Rachel. Rachel rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, this should be good," she said, chuckling. Mr. Davis sat down at the witness stand. His voice trembled at first, but the judge gave him a reassuring nod. "Take your time, sir," Judge Williams said. "You are safe here." Mr. Davis swallowed and began. I run a small grocery store on the east side. One night, Officer Rachel came in during closing hours. I asked her politely if she could wait until the next morning to buy something because I had already locked the register. She laughed at me, and then she told me that if I didn't reopen my store, she could make life hard for me. Ima. Courtroom stirred. Rachel laughed loudly, interrupting. "Oh, come on. He's twisting the story. I was joking. People are too sensitive." Judge Williams raised a hand for silence. He turned to Mr. Davis. "And how did you feel at that moment?" Mr. Davis's eyes glistened. "Helpless, Your Honor, like I was small, like I didn't matter. I reopened the store because I was afraid. I knew she had the power to cause trouble for me. I couldn't sleep that night." The room grew quiet. Rachel shifted, trying to wave it off. "He's exaggerating. I didn't threaten him. He just didn't get my sense of humor." But Judge Williams' gaze lingered on her. His voice was calm but sharp. "A joke that causes fear is not a joke. It is intimidation. Authority is not given so that people may be made small, officer. It is given so they may feel safe." Rachel smirked, but her laughter was thinner this time. She leaned back, arms crossed, and muttered, "Whatever." The judge signaled for the next witness. A young woman entered, barely in her 20s. She held her purse close, her hands trembling slightly. She spoke softly at first, her voice cracking. I was stopped by Officer Rachel last year. She pulled me over for a broken taillight. When I tried to explain that I couldn't afford to fix it right away, she told me maybe I should stop wasting money on makeup and parties. She said girls like me never get far anyway." Rachel burst into laughter. "Oh, this is ridiculous. That's not intimidation, that's honesty. I was giving her advice." The young woman's voice trembled, but she held her ground. "It wasn't advice, it was cruel. I cried the whole drive home. I felt worthless." Judge Williams leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Rachel. "And did you find that helpful? Did it serve her in any way, officer?" Rachel shrugged. "If she cried, that's her choice. I can't control people's feelings." The judge's voice grew firmer, though still calm. "But you can control your words. You can choose dignity instead of cruelty. And in that choice lies the measure of your character." The courtroom was spellbound. People weren't just hearing testimonies. They were hearing truths about what power should mean. One by one, more witnesses came. Each told stories not of violence, but of arrogance, of being mocked, belittled, or made to feel powerless. Every time, Rachel dismissed them with laughter, calling them too soft, too dramatic, or too weak. But each time, Judge Williams countered her laughter with silence, with wisdom, and with questions that cut through her defense like a blade. At last, the prosecutor stepped back, satisfied. The evidence wasn't about broken laws anymore. It was about broken trust. The courtroom had seen it. They had felt it. Rachel, however, wasn't ready to surrender. She leaned forward, gripping the microphone. "This is all nonsense. I've arrested criminals, stopped fights, kept neighborhoods safe. And this is what I get? Complaints from people who can't handle a little tough talk? You're all pathetic." Her words echoed loudly. For the first time, Judge Williams' eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his presence filling the room. "Officer Rachel," he said, his voice low but powerful, "do you truly believe the badge gives you the right to strip people of their dignity?" Rachel smirked. "The badge gives me the right to enforce the law. If people don't like it, that's their problem." The judge shook his head slowly. "No. The badge gives you responsibility, not superiority. It is not a weapon for pride. It is a promise to protect." The audience stirred. Heads nodded. A murmur of agreement filled the room. Rachel looked around, suddenly realizing the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. She leaned back, her laugh forced now. "This is ridiculous. You're all against me. This is some kind of show." The judge's gaze didn't waver. "The only show here, officer, is the one you have created with your arrogance. But power is not measured by laughter nor by intimidation. Power is measured by the strength to lift others up, not to push them down." Rachel swallowed hard. For the first time, her smile flickered. She glanced at her lawyer, but he avoided her eyes. The test of power had begun, and Rachel was losing. Not because the judge raised his voice, not because he threatened her, but because his calm truth was exposing her arrogance. And as part 3 ends, the once confident officer found herself facing something she could not laugh away, a wisdom deeper than her pride, and a power greater than her badge. The courtroom sat in thick silence after the last witness stepped down. The air felt heavy, almost like the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of every story told. The spectators leaned forward, waiting. The lawyers sat back in their chairs, exchanging quiet glances. Even the bailiff, usually stone-faced, looked uneasy. At the center of it all, Rachel still sat defiantly. She adjusted her uniform and forced another laugh, though it sounded hollow this time. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Some sad stories, a few tears, and now I'm supposed to be guilty? Please. I've seen worse complaints filed against other officers, and they're still wearing their badges." Her words rang out, but they didn't carry the same confidence as before. They felt more like armor she was desperately holding up, even though it was cracking at the edges. Judge Williams sat quietly, studying her. His face was calm, but his eyes were steady. Eyes that had seen arrogance before, eyes that had seen lives destroyed when pride was allowed to rule unchecked. He lifted his gavel gently but did not strike it. "Officer Rachel," he began slowly, "you have spoken much today, and every word has painted a picture, not of strength as you believe, but of arrogance, not of authority, but of abuse, and not of justice, but of pride." Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but the judge raised his hand, silencing her instantly. The courtroom, too, fell into complete stillness. "This is not a trial of law alone," Judge Williams continued. "It is a trial of character. The evidence is clear. You have treated those you swore to protect as less than human. You have mocked, belittled, and intimidated. You may laugh at their pain, but their pain is real." Rachel's smirk faltered. She shifted in her chair, her fingers tightening against the wooden armrest. "So what? You going to fine me? Suspend me for a week? That's what usually happens. Let's just get this over with." The judge leaned forward, his voice stronger now. "No, officer. This court will not hand you a punishment that teaches you nothing. A fine will not break arrogance. A suspension will not rebuild dignity. You do not need punishment. You need perspective." The room stirred. Reporters scribbled faster. Lawyers whispered. Even Rachel looked confused. "Perspective?" she repeated, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and uncertainty. Judge Williams nodded. "Yes. You came into this courtroom believing your badge made you untouchable, that it placed you above others, but today, I strip you of that illusion. You are hereby relieved of your badge and your authority, not as punishment, but as liberation." Rachel's jaw dropped. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Some spectators clapped, others whispered loudly. Rachel slammed her hands against the table. "What? You can't do that. My badge is my life, my years of service." The judge's voice cut through her protest. "Your years of service mean nothing without respect. Authority without humility is a danger to society. You believed your badge was a crown, but today it is removed. Not because you are worthless, but because you must rediscover your worth without it." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel stared at the judge, her face pale. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, laughter failed her. Pride failed her. The judge continued, his tone softer now, though no less firm. "You are not beyond redemption, but redemption does not come through power. It comes through humility. You must learn what it means to serve, not command. What it means to listen, not mock. What it means to lift others up instead of pushing them down." Rachel shook her head, tears threatening to form, though she blinked them back. "You're ruining me," she whispered. Judge Williams leaned forward, his gaze unshakable. "No, officer. I am saving you. You came into this courtroom blind to the truth. My verdict today is not to ruin you, but to open your eyes, to remind you that humanity is greater than authority, that respect is greater than fear, that humility is greater than pride. The spectators nodded. Some wiped tears. Others whispered words of agreement. The entire room seemed to breathe in the weight of the moment. Rachel sat frozen, her hands trembling. She wanted to argue, to fight, to laugh it all away. But the strength wasn't there. The judge's words had cut too deep, striking not just her actions, but the very foundation of who she believed she was. Finally, she whispered, "So what happens now?" The judge's voice softened further. "Now you walk a different path. You will step into your community not as an officer but as a neighbor. You will see the people you once mocked as equals. And if you choose one day, you may rebuild what you have lost. But it must begin with humility. Without it, you will never truly serve." Rachel lowered her head. The courtroom was silent, watching as the once proud officer sat trembling, stripped of her badge, stripped of her arrogance, left only with the truth she could no longer escape. Judge Williams lifted his gavel and finally brought it down. Bang! This court is adjourned. The sound echoed like thunder. Reporters rushed out, their pens scratching frantically. Spectators whispered, some smiling, some still wide-eyed with shock. But all of them knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. This was not just a legal decision, it was a moral one. Rachel remained seated, staring at her empty chest where her badge had once gleamed. She touched the spot with shaking fingers, as though realizing for the first time that the badge had never truly been her power. It had only been a symbol, one she had misunderstood. Her lawyer whispered to her, urging her to stand. Slowly, unsteadily, she rose to her feet. For the first time, her head bowed, not in defeat, but in something new. Something she had never allowed herself to feel. Humility. And as she walked out of the courtroom, the cameras flashing, the whispers buzzing, she carried no laughter, no smirk, no mocking words. Only silence. A silence almost as powerful as the one Judge Williams had carried from the start. The verdict had been delivered, unexpected, unconventional, but unforgettable. It was not a sentence to destroy, but a chance to rebuild. And though Rachel didn't know it yet, this moment would mark the beginning of a transformation that would change her life forever. The verdict had ended the courtroom drama, but for Rachel, the true story was only beginning. She left the courthouse that day surrounded by flashing cameras, curious reporters, and whispers from the crowd. The badge that once gleamed proudly on her chest was gone. Her laughter, once loud enough to rattle the room, had disappeared. All that remained was silence. Rachel walked down the courthouse steps slowly, her head lowered. For the first time, she didn't feel like the strongest person in the room. She felt small, vulnerable, lost. Her lawyer muttered something about appeals, but Rachel barely listened. The judge's words replayed in her mind again and again. Authority without humility is a danger to society. The badge is not a crown, but a promise to protect. Respect is not demanded, but given. Each sentence struck her deeper the more she thought about it. She had walked into the courtroom convinced of her strength, yet she walked out realizing she had built her life on arrogance. And now that arrogance had been torn away, she didn't know what was left. That night, Rachel sat alone in her apartment. Her uniform hung neatly in the closet, but it felt like a stranger's clothing now. She touched the empty space where her badge once rested. For years, she had believed that little piece of metal defined her. Without it, she felt stripped bare. For hours, she stared at the ceiling, asking herself the same question over and over. Who am I without the badge? Days passed. The news spread quickly. Some celebrated the verdict, saying justice had finally been served. Others mocked her, calling her the arrogant officer who thought she was untouchable. Rachel tried to ignore the noise, but every word reminded her of the truth she could no longer hide from. One afternoon, she received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. It was from Mr. Davis, the grocery store owner who had testified against her. Officer Rachel, the letter read, I don't know if you will read this, but I wanted to say something. I was angry at you for a long time. I felt powerless and humiliated. But after the judge's verdict, I realized something. Maybe you didn't know how much your words hurt. Maybe you didn't understand. I hope now you will see. People like me don't need you to be perfect. We just need you to treat us like we matter. I forgive you, and I hope one day you forgive yourself." Rachel held the letter in her trembling hands. For the first time in years, tears spilled down her cheeks. She had always dismissed people like Mr. Davis as weak. Yet here he was, showing her more strength than she had ever shown. Him, the strength to forgive. The letter shook her deeply. It was as though a door had opened in her heart, one she had kept locked for too long. Slowly, Rachel began to change. She started small, walking through neighborhoods not as an officer but as a neighbor. At first, people avoided her. They remembered the arrogant officer who had once mocked them. But Rachel didn't give up. She offered to help at the local community center, sweeping floors, carrying boxes, serving food. No uniform, no badge, no authority, just a pair of hands willing to work. At first, people whispered, questioning her motives. But over time, they began to see something different. Rachel wasn't laughing anymore. She wasn't mocking. She was listening. One evening, the young woman who had testified against her, the one Rachel had insulted during a traffic stop, approached her at the community center. Rachel braced herself, expecting anger, but the young woman simply said, "I didn't think you would come here. I thought you'd just disappear." Rachel looked her in the eyes, her voice quiet. "I almost did. But the judge, he gave me a chance to see myself clearly. And I didn't like what I saw. I want to change that." The young woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then prove it. Not to me, to yourself." Those words became Rachel's new mission. She no longer sought power or control, she sought growth. She began volunteering regularly, not just at the community center but at schools, shelters, and events. She listened to people's stories she had once dismissed as complaints. She realized now that behind every face was a life, a struggle, a dignity that deserved respect. Months passed and Rachel's reputation slowly began to shift. People no longer called her the arrogant officer. They began to see her as something else, a woman humbled but not broken. 1 year later, Rachel returned to the courthouse. This time, she wasn't in uniform. She wasn't standing at the defense table. She was in the audience, quietly observing. Judge Williams was presiding over another case. When the session ended, Rachel waited until the crowd dispersed. Then, with slow, hesitant steps, she approached the bench. Judge Williams looked up, his eyes as calm as ever. "Officer Rachel," he said. She shook her head softly. "Not officer. Just Rachel now." The judge studied her for a moment. "And how is Rachel doing?" She took a deep breath. "Learning. Failing. Trying again. For the first time, I'm starting to understand what you meant that day. Authority isn't power, it's responsibility. And respect isn't something you demand, it's something you give." A faint smile touched the judge's lips. "And do you feel stronger now, without the badge?" Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, because now I'm not hiding behind it. I'm finally learning to be human first." The judge leaned back, satisfied. Then perhaps the verdict did its work. Rachel's eyes softened. "It did. It saved me." For the first time in years, Rachel felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't redeemed overnight. But she was walking a different path now. One paved with humility, respect, and a new understanding of what it truly meant to serve. As she left the courthouse that day, Rachel glanced at the steps where she had once walked down, stripped of her badge and filled with anger. This time she walked down lighter, freer, and with a quiet promise to herself. Never again would she confuse authority with arrogance or power with pride. The verdict that once felt like the end had become her beginning. And though her journey was far from over, Rachel knew one thing for certain. The lesson Judge Williams gave her would guide her for the rest of her life.